Today's guest is a woman whose strength and courage embodied exactly what From Dark to Light is all about. At just 42 years old, after finding a lump, Jessica was diagnosed with stage 1 triple-positive breast cancer. What followed was a whirlwind of appointments, specialists, and life-altering decisions. When Jessica learned that part of her cancer was aggressive, she began 12 consecutive weeks of chemotherapy before undergoing a double mastectomy and reconstruction. But even in the face of fear and uncertainty, she made a powerful choice to fight for normalcy, not just survival. She chose to use cold cap during treatment, paying $15,000 out of pocket to help preserve her hair, not out of vanity, but out of love. She wanted her children to see their mom's strength, not sickness. After months of treatment, multiple surgeries, and a year of immunotherapy, Jessica rang the bell on August 1st, 2022. A moment that marked not just the end of her cancer journey, but the beginning of her transformation. Since then, she's turned her pain into purpose. Alongside 5 other incredible women, Jessica co-founded a foundation that supports women battling any type of cancer. Since 2022, they've donated over $69,000 to help others in their fight, providing hope, relief, and community. Jessica's story is one of fierce determination, unconditional love, and unwavering light in the face of darkness. Please join me in welcoming Jessica Norman to From Dark to Light. Hi, Jessica. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so excited to see you. I got to see you a couple weeks ago when I was back in New York, and you were hosting an event, which I want to get to in a little bit. But your story is something I think is going to resonate with a lot of people because you ended up with a diagnosis of breast cancer, and 1 in 8 women in this country is going to also be diagnosed with that. And so I just want to see if you could take us back to pre-diagnosis. What was life like before you found out?
Yes, life was great. I had just gotten married 2 years. No, wait, let's see. 2021 was when I was diagnosed. So, yes, 2 years previous. Just had gotten married. So, my husband and I have a mixed family, my daughter and my 2 stepkids. We had put in a pool in our house and vacationing and had a couple dogs, and work was great for myself and my husband. So life really had never been better.
Ugh, that's wonderful. And then what ended up happening to where you decided that you needed to go to the doctors? What happened?
Yeah, so I have always been a firm believer in getting mammograms every year, and I did that.
Mhm.
I had actually had my mammogram a couple months prior, and one day in the bathroom, I noticed something on my left breast, and I felt it and felt a lump.
Hmm.
So I had Joe, my husband, feel it, and he said, you should definitely go get that checked out, especially because I had had a family history of breast cancer. So my grandma
Mhm.
had breast cancer and my aunt had breast cancer. So nothing that we take lightly in this family.
Wow.
Actually, I was going to Wendy Logan, which is a facility up in Rochester, for my yearly mammograms.
Mhm.
So I called them, and fortunately, they were able to get me in like 2 days. So my mom and my aunt went up with me. Wendy Logan is the type of facility that they do everything all at once. So it's not a waiting game.
I love
So,
that. I love
yeah,
you told me that and I was like, "Holy cow, if every location could be like that." I mean, I get goosebumps because, I had my own minor diagnosis and it's just a waiting game, and that waiting is literally the most mental torture because you think the worst of the worst, right, while you're waiting. And you
yeah.
said you literally got to tell us what you got in that one day.
Yeah, so drove up there with my mom, my aunt, went in, and it was slightly after COVID, so nobody could come in with me. So I went in by myself. They did a mammogram, brought me back to the waiting room, said, okay, we're going to take you in for an ultrasound next. Take me in for an ultrasound right after that. And that is when they saw the mass that was in my breast. So right away, as soon as I saw it on the screen, I just knew
Mm,
that it had to be cancer. I just had a feeling. And so then they took me back out in the waiting room and they said, okay, we're going to bring you back in a few minutes and we're going to do a biopsy. And so they brought me back. The doctor did a biopsy and said, we'll have the results in 24 hours.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
What? I mean,
Yes.
you know how abnormal this is
Yeah,
to get that kind of treatment?
I do because I've had so many people that go get mammograms or ultrasounds or things locally, and there's
Mhm,
always so much time in between. And I'm just shocked when they tell me that because, like you said, waiting is the hardest part. Like the
mhm.
unknown is the hardest part.
Yeah. So when you were waiting in the room, first of all, you and I were best friends in middle school. I've known you
Yeah.
since I was 13, and you have the best support system on the planet. You guys vacation together, your family, your parents are remarried, but you guys vacation. I mean, I love your mom and your aunt. So I can imagine that they are just sitting there. Are you texting them like what
Yeah.
is going on? Are you freaking out?
Yeah, so I was actually pretty calm and I'll get into when I stopped being calm,
Yeah.
but I was so used to I mean, probably 10 years before that, I had had an abnormal mammogram and
Mm,
had to go do an ultrasound and a biopsy and it ended up being benign. So
mhm,
I kind of had a history of this and I also always felt like okay, my grandma had it, my aunt had it, is this something that I'm going to deal with? And kind of
mm.
always just prepared myself for that.
Yeah.
So I'm texting them, letting them know kind of what's going on. Got the biopsy, went out to the car and just said, like, here's what happened. They're going to
Mm,
call me within 24 hours. So the next day was actually our anniversary,
mhm,
our 2-year anniversary, Joe and I's. And I was working from home that day because I was running some like national programs on my computer.
mhm,
And I'll never forget, I was at the end of it was at the end of the day and I was on virtually facilitating this national training and my phone rang and it
mm.
was Rochester and I couldn't answer it because I had to finish the last like 10 minutes of this program.
Yeah.
And so I got done at like 4:30 and I checked the message and it was the doctor and just said to call her back. And so I called her back and she said, I just want to let you know that your biopsy did come back as cancer.
Mm, mm.
And I said, okay, what do I do next? And she said, you need to schedule an MRI to make sure it hasn't spread. And you need to find a breast surgeon and you need to find a plastic surgeon. And that was pretty much it.
When she said that to you, did you go numb? Like, what were you thinking? And then to say, oh, then you got to go and do all this other stuff seems so
Yeah.
overwhelming.
So still, I was at the point where I was, I think, in disbelief, just thinking like, this won't be a big deal. Like, we'll get it taken care of. It'll be no problem. I went downstairs because my in laws were here bringing home Joe's kids from school. And I told them Joe was actually riding back with a coworker from out of town work event. And I
Mm,
didn't want to call him because I
mhm.
wanted him to get home. And he was texting me, like, have you heard? Have you heard?
Yeah.
And so I waited till he got home to tell him.
Mm,
And I think telling my mom was probably the hardest because I just knew how she would react,
yeah.
knowing that you have to watch your child go through this. I know
Mhm.
it's a situation that I would never want to be a part of,
Right.
and having kids. So I think I was still in disbelief that day, and I just went through the day. And Joe and I got in the car that night, and we went over to my mom's, and we just sat and talked. And I drank wine and was like,
Mhm,
this is going to be okay. The next day, I was scheduled to ride with my boss, who I have had a really close relationship with.
mhm,
So I made the decision that I was going to drive to Rochester to meet him and work for the day.
mhm,
I started making phone calls that morning, calling my OBGYN. They were supposed to do a prior auth for my MRI, calling around. I had no idea where to start with a surgeon and a plastic surgeon. All I knew was Rochester was the place everyone goes. for surgery,
Mhm.
for good care. So I called some physicians at a health system I was familiar with because of work. And I think at that point, I also was calling my insurance company to see what doctors were covered on hold for so many minutes with each phone call. And I think that's when it really started to kick in.
Mm.
And I just broke down and I called my husband and I was like, I don't want to do this.
Mm.
I don't want to be in this situation.
Yeah.
I want to go back to yesterday before I got that phone call. And I want to go back to how my life was.
Ugh.
And so I got to Rochester, met my boss in a Panera parking lot, and I told him what happened. And he said, I can't believe you drove out here. I can't believe you were going to try to work and you need to go home.
Mm.
So I did go home, made phone calls the whole way home. But I think the biggest thing with that is like you don't realize how much work it is to get
Yeah.
all these things approved and referrals and things like that. And
Mhm.
for somebody that's, older or somebody that's not as familiar with the healthcare system, it would be so overwhelming for them.
Yeah.
My OBGYN told me they were not going to do a prior auth for me to get an MRI because they hadn't been the ones to refer me to Wendy Logan.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was devastating. Here I'm, finding out that I just got a cancer diagnosis and you're telling me you're not going to help me take the steps that I need to take to
Yeah.
fix all of this.
Wow.
Yeah. So I ended up getting my primary care doctor to do the prior auth and I was able to schedule the MRI.
Wow. So just in the first 24 hours, you get this terrible news. It's life changing, but then you have to just try to figure out the next steps. That's so interesting that your doctor who diagnosed, they didn't have like, okay, we use this doctor, this doctor. It was really more of like, figure it out.
Right.
Wow.
She did throw out a couple names, I think, if I recall correctly. She threw out a couple names, but that it was very strange to me
Hmm.
for them to just say, okay, you have cancer. Now here's the laundry list of things you have to go do, where
Wow.
you really just want to crawl into a hole
Yeah.
and do nothing. You have to
Huh.
like, start making phone calls and start advocating for yourself.
It just sounds so overwhelming, especially because mentally you're already in this probably like a state of mind where you're kind of spinning anyways, and then you have to try to figure stuff out. Aren't there patient care coordinators at a lot of places? Have you heard of those that kind of help you through the process?
Yeah, so when I ended up going to Folk Cancer Center, they have a care coordinator who can help you get support and things like that. But you have to remember, like, I wasn't established at any of these places yet.
Right.
So, like, I had to pick someone to be my breast surgeon in order
Mm.
to get access to a coordinator.
Yeah.
I had to pick my oncologist. I had to pick my plastic surgeon. So once I was established in those places, there was a lot of resources, but it was figuring out who I was going to go to in the beginning.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So you figure it out eventually, right?
Yeah.
And how do you decide who you're going to go with? And you go, and are you like, "Ooh, I don't know if I chose the right one," or like, how did you decide?
Yeah, so the system that I was familiar with, I called their breast surgery office and I just said to the receptionist, I said, I would like to have a woman. Who do you recommend? And she gave me the doctor's name and I said, okay, schedule me an appointment. And luckily, I got one of the best. She was amazing throughout the whole thing. So very happy with that. And then plastic surgeon, kind of same thing. Like started Googling plastic surgeons in the
Mhm.
same area and called an office, asked who they had openings with.
Mhm.
You have to remember, like, kind of everything has to line up because the breast surgeon and the plastic surgeon are both going into your surgery at essentially the same time.
Right. Right.
Like the breast surgeon will start and the plastic surgeon will finish. So you have to have everything to line up,
Yeah. But
basically.
in your case, it wasn't like you're just going to go and get surgery, right? They're not just doing a lumpectomy where they're going to remove. You ended up having to get chemo. How did
Yeah.
that come about?
So I scheduled my MRI for the morning up in Rochester, and I scheduled my first appointment with the breast surgeon in the afternoon. So I go to the MRI, and the nurse says, okay, they will read it. And I had this done at Wendy Logan. They'll read it, and then they'll send it over to the breast surgeon. And I was going from one to the other. So normally it wouldn't be this quick,
Yeah.
but they said we'll try to have the radiologist read it as soon as possible to send it over to your breast surgeon so when you're there.
Yeah.
And so they called me and they said, we have great news. It's contained. None of the cancer has spread. So here I am, like, so happy,
Yeah.
thinking, okay, this is going to be so easy. Like, I'm going to get a lumpectomy and we're going to be out of here. It's going to be done. And we went over to the appointment with my breast surgeon, and I was like happy and in a good mood. And we go in, she does the exam, talks to me a little bit, and she says, okay, I'm going to have you get dressed and I'm going to have you meet me in the office
Mm.
in this little conference room. And so we go in the conference room, and she says, the type of cancer that you have is triple positive. So that means it's estrogen, progesterone, and HER2 positive.
Okay.
So it's all hormone based. The HER2 is a very aggressive type of cancer. So she says, you're going to need chemotherapy prior to getting surgery.
Mm.
And literally,
Mm.
like, I felt my body get hot and just dark all around me. And I said, so that means I'm going to lose my hair. And she said, yes. And I don't know why, but that was what hit me the hardest.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reason is, number one, your hair is part of your identity. You see people on movies, and you've seen people in your community that have gone through chemo, and you never think it's going to be you.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing was, like, my kids. Presley was very young at the time, and
Yeah.
when you lose your hair, they are automatically going to associate that with you being sick. And I didn't want to be that sick mom that was going
Yeah.
through chemotherapy. So that was the hardest part, I think, hearing that news. I left there sobbing the entire way home from Rochester, just asking, why me? Why me?
Mhm.
Why does it have to be me? And I got home and I started thinking about people that I knew in the area that had gone through chemo and had done cold capping.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
I,
can you tell everybody what cold capping is? Because I think a lot of people, when they see people on Instagram or whatever, and they have cancer, but they're like, well, you don't really have cancer because you haven't lost your hair. But
right.
people are like you spending thousands of dollars to do this cold capping.
Yes. So it's something that's been around for a little bit, not super long. But at the time when I was going through it, it was not covered by insurance. Now, New York State just implemented a law that cold capping is covered in New York State.
Wow.
So great for people moving forward.
That is.
But cold capping is where you either have a machine that runs to a cap that you leave on your head, or you can do the manual cold caps, which is where you get a bunch of caps and put them in a cooler with dry ice, and they have to be taken off and alternated every 20 minutes. So the manual one was a lot cheaper,
Mhm.
but it was, like I said, right after COVID. So I wasn't going to be allowed to have anybody go in chemo with me to help me do
Really?
that. Yeah.
Oh,
So
wow.
my husband did end up being allowed in, but when we first started with the appointments, like, they said that you couldn't bring anybody in
Wow.
because of COVID. So that wasn't really an option for me. So I started doing research on the machines, and also talking to somebody that had done it, but at a much bigger facility, like in New York
Hmm.
City, that had the machines.
Yeah.
So what it is essentially the machine that I had. You turn it on and it gets down to 32 degrees. So I had to put actually panty liners on my forehead and my
Hmm.
ears, and then a swim cap and a then a cap over it that had cords attached to the back of it,
Hmm.
and it freezes your hair follicles and slows the metabolism of them and makes your hair follicles not as vulnerable to the chemotherapy. So essentially, it's like keeping the chemo away from your hair follicles
Hmm.
to retain your hair.
Wow.
So I had to wear it an hour before during chemo, which usually lasted 2 to 3 hours, and then for 4 hours afterwards. So usually it was like 8 to 5.
Yeah.
I would just, my husband would unplug the machine from the wall at the cancer center, plug it into a generator, hand me the generator. I would get in the back seat of the car. We would drive home. I would go up
Wow.
to my bedroom, unplug it from the generator, plug it into the wall, and I would just lay in bed until 5 o'clock when I could take it off. And when I would take it off, there would be icicles all over my entire head.
Was it painful?
Originally, it was very painful, like when I first would put it on,
Hmm.
but then I think I just got used to it.
Yeah.
I would take Tylenol like prior to starting.
Mhm.
It was definitely not enjoyable, I will say that.
I can imagine. Yeah.
But looking back now, it was totally worth it. Obviously, I kept most of my hair. I lost
Hmm.
some hair underneath,
Hmm.
but it was definitely worth it for me. I know it's, not something that everybody chooses to do,
Yeah.
but that was just something that was important for me to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. And, I think it was so admirable, really, to think of like, okay, how is this going to impact the kids, in doing it really because of that, not out of vanity's sake. Of course, you want to keep your hair, but really it's so that the kids have less fear and stress and anxiety about their mom being sick. Can you share with us how you guys ended up telling the kids?
Gosh, we sat Sadie and Max down and we explained everything to them. They were a little bit older.
Hmm.
Sadie was a little bit more understanding. Like I said, Presley was really young.
Hmm.
So, like her and Max, I don't think they really understood like what was happening because
Hmm.
on the outside I looked fine.
Yeah.
I would, I always had chemo on Mondays, and then Tuesdays was like usually the day where I felt the crappiest and the most tired, and but I still like went on with daily life, like taking
Hmm.
them to school, going to school activities, going to school functions and sporting functions. So they never really saw me like sick. I was
Hmm.
I was also very fortunate that like the chemo didn't make me sick.
Mm.
I would come home and like I said, I'd stay in bed with the cold cap, but then I would be up eating dinner with everybody and
Hmm.
doing normal things. So I was very lucky in that aspect because you see
Wow.
how it affects a lot of people and you can
Yeah.
be very sick from it.
Yeah.
But so I don't think they really truly understood, like explaining like, oh, I have cancer
Hmm.
in my breast
Hmm.
and I have to get this medicine and then I'm gonna have to have surgery.
Yeah.
So I think they probably realize now more so looking back
Yeah.
kind of what I went through.
So when you were alone and, no one's around, did you have those moments where you broke down and felt sorry for yourself? And like, I mean, which any of us would, right? Where you're just like, oh my God. Like, so did you have those moments when no one was around?
Yeah, I think the like biggest moment I had of that was that day I came home after calling the insurance companies and
Hmm.
everything kind of set in. And
Yeah.
I just remember sitting at the end of my bed while Joe was in there and just crying and saying, I don't want to die. I don't want to
Hmm.
die.
Yeah.
Because when you've never been through that, you don't know what to expect.
Right.
You read all the stories and you hear all the horror stories of
Mm.
people getting diagnosed, and you have people saying, "Oh yeah, my aunt had cancer and she passed away from it." And
Yeah.
so, those are the things you think. So that was like the hardest moment,
Hmm.
and the unknown also. So from the time that I was diagnosed until the time that I went to the oncologist in Rochester. So when my breast surgeon told me I had to have chemotherapy, I scheduled an appointment with an oncologist in Rochester. And when I went into his office, he had a whiteboard and he drew everything on it. Like what my diagnosis was, what my treatment options were, gave me every option I could imagine.
Hmm.
We decided on what would be best, which was once a week for 12 weeks.
Hmm.
I could have had the option to get a little bit more potent chemo and do it every 3 weeks, but looking at the time frame, it would have taken longer to do that. So I went with the 12 weeks. And I think walking out of there, knowing what I had in front of me, like the surgery didn't scare me.
Hmm.
It was more the chemo that scared me. So I
Yeah.
think walking out of there made me kind of stand a little taller and say, I'm going to do this. Like,
Hmm.
I'm going to get through this. I'm going to beat this. And you know, that's the way that it's going to be. And I
Yeah.
had that attitude all the way up until I was done with chemo. And then it was like, okay, now your next step is you have to wait a month for, everything to clear out of your system before you can go into surgery. So
Mm.
that month was hard. You're trying to go back to a normal life, but you can't go back to a normal life because here you're going to have this major surgery in a month. And I just remember sitting on the couch and wishing for that day. Like
Mm.
I wanted that day to come so bad.
Yeah.
And when it finally came, the next day when I got to go home, I was in a lot of pain and, very groggy, but I was just so happy to
Mm.
have the cancer out of my body. I chose a double mastectomy because I didn't ever want to have to go through this again.
Hmm.
I could have easily chose to have a lumpectomy,
Hmm.
and I could have been back to work like the next day if I had a lumpectomy. And
Hmm.
I knew that I didn't want to deal with this ever again and have to start over. So
Yeah.
I made that decision to do the double mastectomy. And like I said, when I came home, it was the day before Christmas Eve.
Hmm.
So I just put my Christmas jammies on, and my mom had brought my grandpa's recliner and put it in our living room. And I just sat in that recliner with my dogs on the end of the recliner until I was recovered.
Sounds amazing. It sounds amazing. And where do you think that this resilience of yours came from? Because clearly you have a mindset that is unique. Because I think so many people are or would be in that very devastated, can't move forward, or just feel really negative or are going to sleep through each day because of where they're at. Like, where did this resilience of yours come from, you think?
That's a great question. I think it's just the way I was raised and always being a hard worker, seeing everything that my mom had been through. And my dad was always a hard worker. And I had kids and I had a husband and we had a life. And I couldn't just turn my back on that.
Hmm.
I had to fight through it. And I didn't know I was going to come out on the other end a better person, but that's the whole reason why I do things like this.
Hmm.
Because when I first was diagnosed, talking to people that had been through it, I would get on Instagram and spend hours just searching breast cancer tags and
Hmm.
reading their stories and looking at their pictures and reaching out to them. I
Yeah.
met I met a girl, I don't even remember where she lives now, but I met her through Instagram. She was going through it at the same time. I did a t-shirt as a fundraiser. She was doing a t-shirt as a fundraiser, and we actually
Hmm.
swapped t-shirts. So she sent
That's
me one of hers, I sent her one of mine, and that was the only thing that got me through because I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what the journey was going to look like. I didn't know what the other side was going to look like.
yeah.
And so those people helped me figure that out. And so that's why I do what I do.
Hmm.
I documented a lot of my journey on Instagram. As you know, through Wink, I always put it out there that I'm available for anybody that's going through it that needs to talk. Just at the beginning of October, in the same week, I had 3 different people reach out to me
Hmm.
and say that they have somebody that was diagnosed and would I be willing to talk to them? And I said, absolutely.
It's so interesting because you've taken your pain and your situation and really turned it into purpose, which you've helped to start a nonprofit or an organization where you guys raise money. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Wink was started in 2022. Um, One of my friends, she actually had raised a lot of money for the Komen, and I had raised money through my fundraiser. And she reached out to me and asked if I'd be interested in getting together. She invited 4 other women, so there's 6 of us in total, and from the start of our first meeting back in 2022, we kind of had a plan and we fall underneath the Josh Palmer Fund. So that was
Mhm.
like the quickest way for us to be able to start up what we wanted to do without spending a lot of time with legal paperwork and things like
Yeah.
that. So since 2022, we have raised over $69,000 and donated it locally in the community
Incredible.
to cancer centers and infusion centers and pink boutiques. We just had our most recent fundraiser a couple weeks ago that you were able to attend. And I'm really hoping that with that amount of money that we raised, that this year we're going to be able to surpass $100,000.
Wow. That is incredible. It's
Yeah.
incredible. What have you heard from other community members who have been through it that maybe you guys donated money or whatever? How has that made a difference for them?
We always only get part of the story
Hmm.
about what someone's going through, and every story is different. We have donated to individuals in the community, not just organizations, but I'll tell you, part of the reason why I wanted to do this was when I first went to Fall Cancer Center for my first treatment, the care manager, social worker came in and offered me money from the Josh Palmer Fund. And I said, thank you so much. I appreciate it. But somebody else out there needs that money more than I do. My husband was still working. I did go out on disability, but
Hmm.
I cannot imagine having to work through the
Wow.
treatment. And
Yeah.
people have to all the time. Literally, from the day I got diagnosed, nothing, I couldn't focus on anything else.
Hmm.
You think about it at night. You think about it when you wake up in the middle of the night. It's the first thing you think about when you get out of bed or you open your eyes. I was
Yeah.
consumed with it.
Yeah.
So to be fortunate enough to have a job where I could go out on disability, Joe was still working, we could still support our family. That was when I kind of said, like, I need to do something bigger because there are people out there that if they're a single mom
Mm.
and they need to go to treatment and they don't have childcare or they don't have gas to get to the facility or they can't pay their NICEAG bills,
Yeah.
these are all the things that I thought of. So, obviously we hear these stories, we donate the money, we hope that it makes an impact and
Yeah.
helps them through, even if it just helps them a little bit
Hmm.
get through what they're going through. That's what our goal is.
Wow. Wow. I mean, it's just an incredible goal. And I can only imagine how much you guys have helped people. Because I think the peace of mind is what you're lacking when you get this type of diagnosis. I've shared with you that I had stage 0, and of course, it's stage 0. It's when you're first hearing it, you're like, "Okay, what is this?" And you start to become obsessed. Same thing, like, you look on Instagram, you look as and for
Yeah.
me, I was fortunate because I just had to have a lumpectomy, and then they want me to be on this medication. But it does become so consuming, like, especially if you have to see an oncologist, and I personally had an oncologist who was like, "Well, if you don't take the tamoxifen, you're gonna be back here within 5 years." And
Yeah.
she's like, "You might as well have a mastectomy." And I was like, "What?" She's like, "Yeah, you're gonna get it." And I'm not a good patient. I still don't take it. But, I I understand how consuming, and that wasn't even a serious diagnosis. What do you think that people should understand and maybe don't about you no longer have the cancer in your body? And people, I think, sometimes think, "Time to go back to normal life." But
Right.
is it still in the back of your mind?
Of course. In many different aspects. One, every time somebody reaches out to you,
Mhm.
it's a flood of emotions, just bringing back everything and talking about it, um,
Yeah.
which I'm okay with. That I love doing it, but you know,
Relive it.
remember everything and
Yeah.
relive everything. I am on tamoxifen.
Mhm.
So my 4-year anniversary will be in December, which means I have 1 year left on it.
Mhm.
When that 1 year is up, even though there's a lot of benefits to going off the medication, I don't know how easy it's going to be to go off the medication because I'm going to be so scared that
Mhm.
it's going to come back.
Yeah.
So that's one thought. Every time you hear a story about somebody, no matter if it's in the community, 100 million miles away, that they had breast cancer, they got rid of it, and then it came back,
Mhm.
that's the first thing you think about. Like, is that going to happen to me? And then the other thing is my body, like I have implants, don't look like I used to look.
Mhm.
So it's a constant reminder. The
Mm.
scars that I have, every time I look in the mirror, it's a constant reminder of what I went through. Sometimes it's uncomfortable.
Mhm.
Like for some reason this morning, like I was really sore on like both sides of
Mhm.
my breast. It's just because it's not your body.
Yeah.
You know, it's implants in there and it's a foreign object that's in your body.
Mhm.
So that's a constant reminder. And then also like thinking about my daughter and my stepdaughter.
Mhm.
And I tested negative for the gene.
Mhm.
So if I had tested positive, she would be approved for mammograms every year starting at age 30.
Mhm.
But because I didn't test positive, then she has to wait essentially until 40, which is
Mhm.
the normal age that you
Mhm.
should start getting mammograms.
Yeah. I was told, though, that if you have a diagnosis, your daughter can start getting it 10 years sooner.
Um, the laws and rules are always changing and they're
Yeah.
different by state as
Mm.
well. So that may be the
Right.
case, but I will fight tooth and nail for her to start getting
Yeah.
mammograms as early as possible
Yeah.
because, especially like on Instagram, you see so many young people getting diagnosed,
I know.
like in their 20s.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's very scary. And I always say, yes, I tested negative for the gene, but my grandma and my aunt both have had breast cancer. So
Mhm.
I am convinced that it is a gene that has not been discovered yet. When
Mhm.
my mom got tested, they only tested for BRCA1 and BRCA2, which she was negative for.
Mhm.
When I tested, they tested for 37 different genes and it
Mhm.
has only grown since I was tested. So every
Right.
year they're discovering new genes. So I am convinced that
Mm.
I probably do have some sort of genetic disposition,
Mhm.
but nothing that has been confirmed.
Yeah. What would you say is your proudest moment coming out of all of this? You've experienced something that all of us would not want to have, right? But you not only went through cancer and fought it, but you also made the community better. Like, what are you the most proud of yourself?
I mean, probably just taking all of the fear and anxiety and everything that I had throughout that time and turning it into something good. Talking about it is not for everyone.
Hmm.
There are people out there that they went through it. They want to close the book on that chapter of their life and they don't want to talk about it, and that's okay.
Hmm.
Um, I, on the other hand, feel like the more people that I can be there for, the better off that I'm going to be and they're going to be. And I think of it like when somebody calls me and asks me about my experience and asks me questions, the one thing that I always say is, I know it sucks right now. It sucks, and there's nothing you can do about it,
Hmm.
but you're going to get through it and you're
Hmm.
going to be better on the other side. And you have to believe that. So if I can just convince them a little bit to believe that,
Hmm.
and I know I have, because I have people out there that I was there for their whole journey and we still talk.
Hmm.
They still give me updates and they're doing great and they're out on the other side. And it's been a couple years. When I first got diagnosed, I was like, oh my God, being a survivor for 5 years, that's like a lifetime ahead of me. And now
Hmm.
here I am a year away from that.
Yeah.
So I think that's it. If I can just convince somebody to believe in themselves a
Hmm.
little bit more than they did before they talked to me, then
Yeah.
I'm doing my job.
And I was just going to ask you that if there's somebody listening that was just diagnosed with something, if it's breast cancer or something else, what would you say? And it sounds like they're stronger than they realize and it's going to get better. Huh?
Yeah, that would definitely be it. Like you just said, it's not just breast cancer. Like
Mhm.
our fund supports women with any type of cancer.
Mm.
So, any type of cancer, going through it, you will get through it. It's
Mhm.
terrible right now. It's going to be a very hard journey. Everybody's journey is different. And keep your head up, take it day by day, go through each day, one day at a time, each step, one step at a time. And at
Mhm.
the end, you're going to be a stronger person, you're going to be a more informed person, and you're going to be able to go help other people if that's what you choose to do.
Wow. Well, I think you're just remarkable. I'm so proud of you. And I'm so happy that you are healthy and thriving and living that beautiful life of yours with your family. So thank you so much for sharing your message because I know women are hearing this every day that they're diagnosed and they don't know where to turn. So hopefully your message really resonates with them and helps them through at least the first step.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely.
well, thank you,
Thank you
Jessica.
so much for having me.
Here on From Dark to Light, we believe that resilience isn't about pretending the darkness never happened. It's about learning to rise from it and letting our scars tell a story of strength. If today's episode spoke to you, I hope you'll share it with someone who may need encouragement on their own path. Subscribe on YouTube or anywhere else that you get your podcasts. And as always, thank you for joining me in shining a light on the power of the human spirit. Until next time, I'm Julie Crawford, and this has been From Dark to Light.